So, one of the things that I've been arguing for on this show for a long time is the legalization of marijuana. Um, and I'll continue to make that argument because this is not a criminal issue. It's not a criminal issue if somebody is using a substance, even if they use it all the time. Um, if people have problems with it, you get treatment for it. You go to rehab. I know that's very rare if it happens ever with marijuana, but you get the point. The point is, this was never a criminal issue, and it shouldn't be that way with any substance. I'm in favor of legalizing, taxing, and regulating all kinds of substances. And I believe that just from a freedom and liberty perspective. I don't think it's the government's business to get all up in your private business and try to control your life in that way. Now, having said that, I'm kind of amazed at some things I learned just recently about weed that I had no idea about this. And I'm very curious if you guys had any idea about this sort of stuff and the connection to weed. So let me walk you through. Let me share this article with you first, and then we'll dive a little deeper here. So they say alarming surge of Canadian pot users ending up at hospital. Thousands develop anxiety disorders afterward. Latest warning about legalization says kids at, quote, elevated risk. Now, like I said, put aside the whole thing about legalizing or not. I'm in favor of legalizing weed. It already is the case in 24 U.S. states. It should be at the federal level, hopefully very soon. That's the case. Put that aside. Just listen to the actual information that's in this piece. Rising numbers of stoned Canadians end up at hospital emergency rooms, and a shocking number of them go on to develop anxiety disorders, says the latest study on the dangers of legalization. Researchers studied millions of Canadians throughout the 2010s and found that nearly a third of those who showed up at an ER for using weed went on to develop a mental health issue within 3 years. For regular ER visits, that figure was just 5.6%, suggesting cannabis was linked to a roughly fourfold risk of developing anxiety disorders, says the report in The Lancet. Now, by the way, just to be clear, Lancet is a legit medical journal. So this isn't just from Daily Mail where we're reading this from. This studies in The Lancet. Researchers warn that men and younger people aged 10 to 24, 10? Some people are 10 smoking weed? Jesus. We're at a greater risk of developing mental health problems, which can range from anxiety to full-on panic attacks. Dr. Daniel Myron, a University of Ottawa researcher, said pot use has rapidly increased in Canada in the past 15 years. His report is a wake-up call for those who believe the drug is relatively harmless or has health benefits, he said. In some individuals, heavy cannabis use may increase their risk of developing anxiety disorders, Dr. Myron said. Cannabis advocates say the drug has health and social benefits, and that making it illegal does little to stop consumption and only leads to high levels of pointless incarceration, often of young black men. That's undeniably correct. Public attitudes against the drug have shifted markedly, and Canada allowed adult recreational pot use in 2018. In the U.S., 24 states and Washington, D.C. now permit recreational adult use. More than half the U.S. population now lives in a legal weed jurisdiction. Now, critics say widespread use leads to higher rates of mental health problems, substance abuse, especially among teens and young adults, and even more stoned drivers on the road, causing car crashes. So let me just pause here to point out, and I think all of you guys agree with this. I'm in favor of legalization, but that doesn't mean kids should be able to use. You should have, reasonable age limits there as well. And also, I'm in favor of legalization, but I don't believe in, the right to drive when you're high in the same way that I believe in having legalized alcohol. Alcohol is a way worse drug. Having legalized alcohol, but that doesn't mean you have the right to drink and drive. So I think this is all part of the regulatory framework. You need to have reasonable rules and regulations around it. Dr. Myron's study, which also involved ICES, the Briere Research Institute, and the Ottawa Hospital, adds to a growing body of evidence about the dangers of legalization across North America. Researchers examined the health records of more than 12 million Ontario residents with no history of anxiety disorders between 2008 and 2019. Fully 27.5% of the pot users who were admitted to the ER for a cannabis issue went on to be diagnosed with a new anxiety disorder within 3 years, researchers found. So look, They were also 9 times more likely to require another healthcare visit than others for an anxiety disorder down the road. So look, if you talk to people who smoke weed on the regular, what they'll tell you is it actually provides anti-anxiety help for me. So in other words, it's the opposite of what the article is claiming. That like, hey, this actually helps me on the anxiety front. Whereas they're claiming here that it can actually hurt a lot of people. Look, the reality is, and I didn't know this until going through a lot of this new information here. Both things are true, right? Both things are true. There are some people who can smoke weed all the time and it has that anti-anxiety effect on them and they don't deal with any downsides. There's others who it may have an initial anti-anxiety effect, but then it's almost like it like builds up over time. And then when you stop, it's almost like a withdrawal effect that the anxiety will hit you twice as hard because you were suppressing it before and then it comes back harder now, right? There's quite a bit of evidence that, in some people, maybe it's because of just their genetic makeup and how they are, even though you may have an initial anti-anxiety effect, it might make it worse in the long run. And that's exactly what they're saying here, which again is interesting because I didn't know that. I always thought that if you're not going to enjoy weed, right away, right? Like me, for example, it was never my drug. I never liked it very much. It made me feel like paranoid. But, there's some people where they smoke it, feels good, anti-anxiety effects, but then later on gives them more anxiety, which is kind of horrible, right? It just goes to show you that for some people, it just doesn't mesh with them, right? So there's a lot of downsides to alcohol. We all know that. There's also seemingly some downsides to weed, and I don't think many people know this because for so long, since we've been correctly fighting the legalization battle, it's almost like everybody highlights the positive things, right? And everybody forgets that there actually, for some people at least, are negative things associated with it. I'm gonna get to more on that in a minute. They were also 9 times more likely to require another healthcare visit than others for an anxiety disorder down the road. Those suffering from anxiety can experience excessive and persistent worry about fear about everyday situations, as well as intense bouts of fear or terror, often called panic attacks. Public attitudes have shifted fast, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I think you guys get the gist of this. So look, to reiterate again real quick, none of this is to say anything, legalization should happen. No, that's a matter of principle. I don't think people should be locked up over freely choosing to put a substance in their body. That's crazy to me. It's totally victimless so-called crime. It's not even a crime, right? Even if you take it and it's not a good drug for you, doesn't mean you should be incarcerated. I think that's crazy, right? So legalization stands on its own merits. And for a number of people, for a lot of people, pot genuinely does help them, right? Like Snoop Dogg looks fine. He's been smoking every day forever, and he seems fine, right? But I think some people need to understand this is not for everybody. This is not for everybody. So to give another example of this, now I didn't know this until recently. Somebody I know experienced this. Cannabis hypermesis syndrome. You ever heard of this? Cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome can affect people who use cannabis long term. CHS causes frequent, severe nausea and vomiting. Hot baths and showers may temporarily relieve symptoms, but the only way to cure CHS is to stop using cannabis. So they go on to explain here what this is. There's this thing called cyclic vomiting syndrome, CVS. And a buddy of mine had that. One of my best friends had that as a kid. And I remember watching him go through those episodes. He would just throw up like nonstop all day for like 2 or 3 days. It was miserable. It was horrible. This is the same thing, except it's cannabis induced and it can last way longer than 2 or 3 days. You can go 5, 6, 7. Like you need to get to the hospital to get some fluids in your body. You'll be dehydrated. It's something that could literally kill you. All right, so let me give you the symptoms. Persistent nausea, often in the morning. Repeated vomiting and retching. This can happen up to 5 times an hour. Intense abdominal discomfort. Fear of throwing up. Loss of appetite. They go on to say that scromiting is a thing here. What's scromiting? I didn't know this term until this year. Scromiting is what it sounds like. It's like you are screaming for being in so much pain and vomiting. Scromiting. That's what cannabis hypermesis syndrome does to you. Guys, I'm fucking I'm 36 years old now. I didn't know about this. Did you know about this? I'd never heard about this. So come to find out from a healthcare professional that I know, I'm told, oh yeah, we see this all the time now. What? Oh yeah, people come in with these symptoms all the time and they require treatment. What? Well, it turns out what's happening is there are a lot of like high school kids who are hitting their weed vapes. Like, I have like a flavored, this is a cool mint vape and this is some strawberry vape. But like these aren't weed vapes. These are just nicotine vapes, right? But kids will get the weed vapes and they'll just like hit them seemingly all day, every day. Take a couple hits every however long. And they're high for a real, they experience being high like endlessly. They're just always high, right? And then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, after a while, boom, they get these horrific symptoms of extreme abdominal pain, nonstop throwing up, scromiting as it's called, miserable, just, multiple days on end of the worst agony you can imagine. And come to find out, what is it? It's this, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. I can't believe I never heard of this before. So I tell you all of that to say this. Just be aware, right? Just be aware. And especially maybe somebody has gone through something like this. Just be aware that this could be what it is. And again, the way to fix it is to just stop using weed. So again, look, I'm not coming out here to do some drug warrior bullshit and say, oh, we should keep marijuana illegal because of these bad things associated with weed. No. Still in favor of legalizing it, taxing, and regulating it. I believe in freedom. I believe in liberty. The government should not get involved in your private business in any way, shape, or form. When, you're an adult, you make your own damn decisions, you deal with the consequences. The only reason I'm bringing this up is to point out, for a very long time, we've only had the conversation about how good weed is and the positive benefits and how much it helps many people and how it's a genuine medicine for a lot of people. That's all true. But it's also true that perhaps we hyped up the good and ignored or downplayed or didn't even know any of the bad things because for the longest time we've been fighting the genuine and legit and good battle to try to legalize it. Well, we can fight to legalize it and also acknowledge all of the facts about the substance, that with some people, there are actually really, really horrible symptoms and effects and even syndromes that can come about if you're using it too much or you're not using it properly. So I hope got to stop all the kids from smoking for sure. The kids shouldn't have this fucking at all, right? Not at all. Adults should be able to make their own decisions, but just be aware of potential downsides. With some people, it's going to, it'll just have anti-anxiety effects and you'll be hunky-dory and good to go and you never have any problems. It'll make you hungry. Have some Cheetos, have some cookie dough ice cream, chill out, call it a day, go to sleep, right? Some people, that's the effects. Other people will throw up for 5 days straight and scrum it and be absolutely miserable and have no idea what led them to that place when the answer is staring right at them. So, worsening anxiety or bouts of vomiting and nausea, those things can come from it as well. And again, the reason I'm talking about this is I didn't know about any of this. I'm 36. I didn't know about any of it. Now I learned. So I got to share it with you guys, and you do with that information whatever you will.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.